really believe that the family is the biblical way to care for a child. And so, how can we keep children in families as opposed to the orphanage setting? There's a unique, I think, a crazy stat out there, but 80% of kids in the orphanage, it's actually greater than 80, but we'll say 80, but I think it's closer to 85% of kids in an orphanage setting have a living relative. And when you think about that, the fact that a mother saw fit to put her child in an orphanage for hopes of a better life. And what is it due to? It's due to poverty. It's due to disease. It's due to the situation that that mother is in.
Hey guys, welcome back to episode 2 of Kingdom City Conversations. This is Austin Hill, and I am the Next Gen pastor at High Point Community Church in Grand Rapids. And it is great to be back with you. This is an exciting month for us. We have another guest on this podcast and YouTube channel. His name is Mike Krick, and he works for an organization called World Orphans. And Mike and I go back a few years to my time in Reed City up north. And Mike is just an incredible guy. He's got a heart for the disenfranchised and the often forgotten people that are so overlooked, not only domestically but internationally. And he has done a tremendous work through World Orphans in bringing awareness to individuals and especially churches. World Orphans works with a lot of churches to inspire, to equip, and to push on the church to do the work that God has called us to do, and that is to rescue and to work with orphans and widows in their time of need. And that's the perfect religion. That is the perfect faith, to be there for the disenfranchised and those who cannot take care of themselves, who need us. So this was a great interview. I know you're going to enjoy this. I know you're going to really take something from what Mike has to say. It's not only just for learning about World Orphans. This is practical stuff. This is stuff that can help you on a daily basis, and that can encourage you in your daily walk. So hopefully you really take something from this and grow. And after this is done, I'll come back on and just wrap up. But really appreciate you tuning into this and being a part of what we're doing here. We're really trying to bring awareness to what people are doing in the world to obviously bring about kingdom work, to bring about the kingdom in their city. And that's where Kingdom City Conversations really took off, was for that purpose. So if you have someone that you would like for me to interview, you would like for them to be on this podcast to get their 501c3 or their non-for-profit that works for kingdom purposes, works in the name of Jesus Christ, if you'd like for me to interview them and get their name out there, contact me. You can contact me through email. That's going to be in the chat, or in the description of the video or of the podcast, and you can contact me through that. So without further ado, though, I want to introduce you to Mike Krick. All right. Well, thanks, Mike, for being here on this next podcast of Kingdom City Conversations. And Mike, you are our second guest that we've had on the podcast, and it's a joy to have you here today. And for those of you who don't know that are just joining us, Mike is with World Orphans, and Mike is going to tell us a little bit about what they do, who they are, where they are at in the world. But my wife has actually worked with you a couple times with World Orphans. She's gone on a trip with you. So, and we lived only, 10, 15 minutes apart when we lived up north, which is pretty cool. So we got a chance to, hang out a few times and spend some time together. So this is just a real treat for me to be able to chat with you. And I know I'm going to learn a lot about, World Orphans today, and really what a pleasure that is. So Mike, thanks for joining us, man. And I thought maybe you could just start us out by telling us a little bit about yourself and tell us who is Mike Krick.
You're right. Well, thank you first. I appreciate it. It's an honor to be asked to do this. So thank you, Austin. I'm grateful for the opportunity. But yeah, as Austin indicated, live up north. Live actually when Austin and I were 10 minutes apart, I was living in Everett. He was living in Reed City, and I have since then moved to Lake City, which is, and I'm right between actually McBain and Lake City. So even further north. I don't know why I would move further north, but that's where we are for the time being. I am a husband of an incredible wife, Amy, and we've been married. It'll be 22 years in May, and
Mm.
then father to four great kids. My son is almost 20. He's living actually down there in your neck of the woods, down in Rockford,
Yeah.
and thriving down there. He's in a great community of guys that are passionate about their faith, and he's getting opportunities he's a talented musician, getting opportunities to lead worship. And we got three daughters, a sixth grader, ninth as freshman, and a senior. So I am all alone now in a house full of estrogen. So pray for me, pray for me.
Will
No,
do. Yeah.
great, great, great girls, and super proud of them as well. So, and most importantly, I'm a Christ follower. I'm passionate about His Word, and um, passionate about caring for things He cares about, which really I think is how my journey with World Orphans started, as a result of God opening my eyes and my heart to the needs around the globe. In fact, if you want, Austin, I can share a couple stories that I think were instrumental in getting me into the place where I am
Yeah.
or now. So um, I'm gonna back up just a well, you can see I was just telling Austin, you can see the gray in my beard. So I have a little bit of age with me. So I'm backing up probably more than I want to admit, but 25, 30 years ago, I remember heading off to college, went to Cornerstone University, and really felt like, I'm gonna be the next, business dude. I'm going. I had kind of a little entrepreneurial mind and just wanted to put it to practice, learn some skills, and make money. And that's kind of the goal for me
Mm.
with college. And it was my sophomore year that I heard this quote. And what's interesting is I was in chapel, which was required for students at Cornerstone at the time. I don't know if it still is or not. And I think when it was required, you just kind of like, oh my goodness, we gotta go again. But for whatever reason this day, my ears were open and God
Mm.
spoke to me through the speaker. And the quote was, there is one thing in life that I fear more than failure, and that is being successful in something that doesn't count.
Wow.
And it completely changed the trajectory of my life. Now,
Mhm.
I want to pause, because I think if we have a kingdom perspective, it doesn't matter what we're doing, right? I mean, we can go into business. We can be, you name it, a plumber, a tradesman, a teacher, you name whatever the job, so to speak, is. But for me, it was one of those revolutionary moments that said, I could totally hear God's call in my life, that I was to go into full-time occupational ministry. I believe we're all in full-time ministry if we're followers of Christ, but this is the difference for me was occupational ministry. And so changed my major, and that's kind of where this started. And then for when you and I kind of got connected, I was working. Actually, I don't know if I was working at Spring Hill when I knew you, but I worked at Spring Hill up in Everett and so I was in camp ministry for a number of years. And this is kind of the story of how it led to World Orphans. A friend of mine took his family, which I thought was crazy, wife, four kids, moved to Guatemala, started working in an orphanage. And
Mm.
I just thought, who does that, right? But I was actually at a point in life where I was really questioning, how long am I going to be doing camp ministry? Is this really? And I was actually pretty antsy. And so I talked to Amy, and I was like, man, I think I'm supposed to go down there. I'm supposed to spend some time with them and see if this is something that we're supposed to do. And so she gave me her blessing, full steam ahead, went down. And in the midst of my time there, I was like, man, this is it. This is it. We're going. And I'm kind of I'm going to take the bull by the horns. I want to, do my part to change the world or whatever. And
Yeah.
so into that decision, Austin, and it was pretty quick when I got back that God slammed the door. And but He gave me a verse in the midst of it. The verse was, "Be still and know that I am God." And so I, in the midst of the next 30, I think it was 30 days, that I committed to just to doing just that, just being still. And as a result, another quote here. I'm going to probably use some quotes today, just because quotes have had such an impact on my life. But a quote I heard it was our Spring Hill staff. We had kind of a staff conference, and this lady came in, and one of the things she said was, "You can," because I was miserable. I really was. I was not happy in my job, and I was ready for a change. And I really thought moving to Guatemala was the answer. All those sorts of things. But the quote was, "You can do what you love, or you can love what you do." And at that moment, I knew that I needed to choose to love what I do. And if God had called me to full-time camp ministry the rest of my life, so be it. I needed to, it was on me to choose to love it. And uh, I think I needed that point and that kind of awakening, if you will, to get to a point of being able to transition into a different role, but do it God's way and not my way. So, and that's
Yeah.
ultimately the doors led open to World Orphans, and here we are today. And I've been with World Orphans now for it'll be 12 years this year. So.
Wow. Dude, yeah, that's amazing. So I think when I did first meet you, um, it was at a concert at Reed City, and I think Shelly already knew you a little bit before I had. And
Okay.
I remember walking up to you in the back of Reed City NAS, and you were standing there, and we got a chance to shake hands and meet one another. But
Okay.
man,
Yeah.
just what a story, of how God has used you in ways that you never first saw yourself. I'm sure when you were at Cornerstone, sitting in those chapel services,
Right. Right.
awaiting some life that you have envisioned for yourself,
Yeah.
and God was already working and putting people in your way to let you know what He had planned for you. And I think that's
Yeah.
such a beautiful thing. So tell us. I know you mentioned obviously World Orphans. That's a big part of your family right now. Tell us about World Orphans. Where are you guys located? What do you do?
Yep.
What's the mission?
Yeah. So my title, I'm not a big title guy, but my title is Senior Director of Strategic Partnerships, which is really just a fancy way of saying I'm helping raise awareness, build relationships with churches, with donors, helping in unique ways, I suppose, to try to figure out how can we raise money to do what we do, and then steward those donations of our donors well. And so in the midst of all, I mean, that, I mean, people want to give, and I think sometimes there's so many organizations out there to get in good organizations. So how do you help build trust and relationships with people in an effort to allow them to say, "Oh, I believe in what that organization's doing." And so that's ultimately what I'm doing right now is a lot of that. I started in our church partnership department. So we were, and actually my wife Amy, you kind of alluded to this, that Amy is on staff as well. She's now in our church partnership department, but our bread and butter really is partnering churches here in the States with a church overseas. That is really the um, hands and feet of Jesus in the communities that they work in. So our mission is to empower the church to care for orphans and vulnerable families. And so you asked who is World Orphans, and I'll just say, I think we have two pillars of ministry. One is the church, and we really believe that the church is the hope of the world. And if we can come alongside the church, who the church has a, a national pastor who knows the culture, knows the language, already has relationships established in the community. So if we can come alongside them and empower them to do what they were created to do, that's a big part of our excitement and joy and enthusiasm and who we are and what we're trying to do as an organization. The second pillar would be the family, and we really believe that the family is the biblical way to care for a child. And so how can we keep children in families as opposed to the orphanage setting? unique, I think a crazy stat out there, but 80% of kids in the orphanage, it's actually greater than 80, but we'll say 80, but I think it's closer to 85% of kids in an orphanage setting have a living relative. And when you think about that, the fact that a mother saw fit to put her child in an orphanage for hopes of a better life. And
Wow.
what
Yeah.
is it due to? It's due to poverty. It's due to disease. It's due to the situation that that mother is in. And so, there's a cool. I like to share this word picture story because I think it gives a good idea of who we are and what we're doing. But just as a word picture, two pastors walking down a riverbank, and just chatting, sharing life, ministry, whatever. And down the river starts floating all these kids, hundreds and thousands of these kids just floating down the river. And one pastor immediately jumps in and just does his best to try to save as many kids before they get to the waterfall. And of course, he can't save them all. And the kind of evaluates it and says, "Man, where are these kids coming from?" And he runs upstream as far as he can. Where are these kids coming from? And we're, the rescue part is important, but as an organization, we're on the preventative side. We're that second pastor saying, why are these kids getting put in the orphanage, and what can we do to help make a difference? And so that's where we're at as far as doing our part to really educate and make people aware of how this is all transpiring anyway, and how can we keep kids out of that orphanage setting. So
Wow. I love that. Twofold. I mean, the first thing that you guys do is you empower churches to do the work that they've been called to do. I love that because I think a lot of times, the churches are involved in these missions, but it's really you guys, giving the church the resources and really, I mean, they're a vital part of you guys' mission in the world, and I love that. And then secondly, the preventative approach. You're not just filling the gaps with things that these kids need. You're trying to solve the issue. You're trying to really rescue families and make them whole before they ever get to this moment of like a mother having to give up her child because she's in poverty. And I mean, what a special thing that you guys are doing.
yeah, we love it. We consider it a privilege to do it. And of course, the opportunity then, because these churches have that desire to help come alongside and prevent this from happening with some of the most needy families in their community. That's where church partnership comes in, and that's where they might not have the resources to do this. And so, fortunately, we have a number of churches here in the States that have really bought into the mission and vision of who we are and what we're doing, and say, man, we want to come alongside a church in Guatemala or in Ethiopia or in there's a number of countries that we're involved in, but the beauty of that, I think, one of our values from a church partnership standpoint is relationships over resources. And anybody can give. I mean, we can really throw money at a project and say, oh, look what we're doing, and look at the help we're giving. Don't get me wrong, those are good things, but at the end of the day, man, if you really put relationships over resources and say, no, I want to get to know that pastor, I want to get to
Yeah.
know those families, I want to get to know those kids, that's where I think it's a pretty special ministry that we can take then trips from here to there to hopefully annually, although with COVID that's really shut things down and made things a little challenging. But that's the beauty of technology too. I mean, you and I are talking here on Zoom, and we've been, my wife's been a part of so many Zoom calls over the last year with pastors and leaders from Haiti, from
Mm.
Guatemala, from South Africa, and just doing her best to merge and help the partnership grow and thrive, even in the midst of times where we can't get to the countries that we might desire to get to build those relationships. So
Yeah. Oh, that's good. So two things I'll kind of follow up with that, and this is not in our original plan this morning, but one thing would be, I think we mentioned this before, is a little bit of the challenge of COVID that has to do with you guys. I mean, you guys, like, you travel so much, and your point is, like you said, to have these relationships with pastors and to try and build some momentum with getting people on board and working together for this purpose. how has this season been different for you guys? And then also, maybe twofold in that question. I don't know if they're related or not, but you mentioned Amy. You guys work on the same team, so tell me a little bit about how that is like special for your family right now that you guys get to work together for this common purpose.
Yeah. No. So the COVID question is a good one, right? It's been a unique, challenging, frustrating, and just head shaking kind of year.
Mhm.
But um, I think, and we've said this a couple of different times when we've really talked through and processed the year, if anything, COVID has really affirmed our model of empowering the church and empowering international staff. So, some of the countries we have the largest influence in as it relates to the churches that we partner with. Three of those countries would be Haiti, um, Ethiopia, and Guatemala. And then we have a fourth country that we had a staff member in Iraq, where we were really working with refugee families in Iraq, and that's a whole nother conversation. But as a result of COVID, all of our U.S. staff came home. We have no U.S. staff on the ground right now, and I think that's pretty cool, because what that's done is said, hey, we really trust our international staff, and quite frankly, they're killing it. They're the ones that are really stepping up and saying, okay, what do we need to do to come alongside the churches in the whatever country that they're serving in? And so we have, I bet you, let's see, 12. I'm thinking we have 12 to 15 international staff right now,
Wow.
primarily in those four countries that I mentioned, and they haven't missed a beat. They've stepped up and they've done what they needed to do to continue to love on the churches and to continue to work with our U.S. staff to set up. I mentioned Zoom calls earlier, or prayer calls, or encouragement calls. All those sorts of things. We did a drive in April, maybe right after all this went down, and we did this food for families drive where people could say, man, we are passionate about this country and want to help provide food. Over $10,000 was raised, and no admin cost. We sent every dollar that came in, we sent that dollar out to whatever country. And so we've seen some unique things happen in the midst of this season. But I think that's probably the big thing that I've picked up from this is it's really affirmed our model all the more of this is the way to do it, to empower
Mhm.
nationals, to empower the churches to really do what they were created to do.
So
So
yeah, you're learning about maybe a new style of doing this ministry, right? I mean, this is all funneled into something positive for you guys.
yeah, I think so. I mean, the word pivot's been overused, right? But I mean, we all had to do
Yeah.
it, and that's one of the things where I think we really saw that, man. We knew our staff and loved our staff and believed in our staff, but it's different when one of your U.S. staff members that you've really poured energy, time, resources into is down there, and then all of a sudden they're back here. It's just different, and so it's been a beautiful thing to watch it
Mm.
transpire. So, what will happen in the future is still up in the air, but I think for the time being, we're super pleased and content and excited to continue to come alongside these folks that are just crushing it for people in their own community and loving on them and loving them well. So
Awesome. Wow.
the second part of your question,
Yeah.
with Amy and our family. So um, we do work on the same team in the sense of we both work for World Orphans. There's a number of different departments within World Orphans, and so I think our the time we spend together from a work or ministry standpoint is actually pretty limited. However, a number of the churches that she helps manage or oversee are churches that I've had the opportunity to travel to. So I have
Mm.
relationships with the pastors personally, whereas her relationships are, more over Zoom. So it's always fun to kind of say, hey, how's, Pastor Philip in South Africa, or how, and she can give me an update on how those pastors are doing and how the partnership is transpiring. One of the first partnerships that I was able to be a part of, I mean, it's probably 11 years ago, was a church in the just south of Columbus, Ohio, and they are partnering with a church in South Africa. And so I feel like I've walked that road with them for 11 years, and I don't dialogue a ton with them anymore. But when I do, it's always super sweet and special. And so for her to be managing that partnership now is pretty cool, because I get updates. But
Yeah.
she's doing a great job. I think she's really enjoying it. She's thriving. And it's been, I think, two years now that she's been on part-time staff. And as a family, even, we just feel really blessed and encouraged by the team that we get to work with. Great group of people, incredible leader, just a meek, humble, and grace-filled president that I love serving with. And probably the highlight for our family has been, we were able to take a trip to Guatemala. It'll be 2 years ago in April. All six of us went and spent time with that original missionary family that I was telling you about as we started our call, that I went down to Guatemala to kind of explore if this was where we were supposed to go. He and his wife are now on staff with World Orphans. And
Wow.
which is incredible to see how that all transpired. But our family went down, and our kids kind of line up in age, and just had an incredible time. The kids got to see, oh, this is what Dad's been a part of for 10 years, and now what Amy's a part of, and these are the people that we get to work with. They met, I don't know, 4 or 5 of our international staff, a couple of our pastors that are just dynamic pastors down there, including I know you were a part of Reed City Church of the Nazarene before
Yeah.
joining the staff at High Point. So
Right.
we spent some time with their partner pastor, which that relationship's just that's been fun to see how that all transpires. But for my kids to see that, and one of the things they said to me, because we kind of incorporated a 4 days of ministry and then 4 days of let's get into the beauty of Guatemala and just explore the culture. And so we kind of split it up that way with this missionary family. And I'll never forget, on the way home, one of my kids said to me, "Dad, I wish we would have done 8 days of ministry. I could have spent more time with the kids," which was super refreshing for me to hear that they loved it
Yeah.
that much. You want to go back. So yeah.
What a legacy. I mean, to like, for your kids to grow up knowing that mom and dad are working together for this mission. It's not like you guys are attempting to be a part of this Fortune 500 company. Like, you are giving your lives to the work that God has equipped us and called us to do. And 10, 20 years from now, they're going to remember always, like, what my mom and dad did to help others. And I think, not a lot of kids can say that about their parents, and what a blessing, that you guys are, and you may never realize that. None of us may never realize, the legacy that we leave onto our kids. But I can certainly say, from a semi outsider's perspective, I think that's gonna leave something for them for a very long time. So I love that. As soon as I heard Amy was coming on staff with you guys, I was like, what a cool thing, man, that those kids are so lucky to witness. But yeah, so let's get into more of, like, World Orphans, man, because I know there's a lot of meat to unpack here. But especially on you guys' website, it says that you guys seek to empower the church to care for orphan children and vulnerable families, and we talked about that a little bit. And this may go more into, like, what you guys did even pre-COVID, but, like, what does that mission look like practically?
Yeah, no, good question. So I think it's important to distinguish that the church is the ultimate decision maker on what that looks like. So it's one of the first things I realized when I joined the staff. So it'll be 12 years in June or July. And I think it was like a year later. I need to have to look back a year or two later, but that's when the earthquake in Haiti happened that just
Mhm.
devastated that Port-au-Prince area. And we weren't super involved in Haiti yet, but I remember our president at the time. and a number of other organizations really said, hey, let's partner together to determine how we can help make a difference in Haiti. So they took a trip down, a couple people from our organization, a couple others. And I think there was a team of 10 or 15 of them that went down, but they spent days interviewing pastors and trying to figure out what is it that you actually need. And I think what surprised me on that initially was I think we all have these really good intentions of things that we want to do. And, I'm sure a lot of us now that are maybe listening to this, and you included, are familiar with When Helping Hurts, and, what we should be doing, what we shouldn't be doing, all those sorts of things. And I think at the time I was, so again, 10 years ago, I was thinking, man, we need to get down there and figure out how can we help these, what do we need to do to get these kids care, those sorts of things, and just do it, but they took their time. And I remember being really impressed with that because at the end of the day, we could have said, we need to do this, and this, but we might not have found out that the things that they needed were very different. It actually really helped home-based care model of how we're keeping kids and families. And what the pastors in Haiti said to us, so they listed four things that they needed. They needed food, they needed education for the kids to continue, they needed medical care, and they needed trauma counseling. Those were the kind of the four things that just kept coming up over and over and over again. And so, you ask about our model and what it looks like. I would say that there's a holistic care approach to who we are and what we're doing. So it's, I mentioned the two pillars earlier, the church and the family. How can we keep, kids and families? But in the midst of the church partnership here and there, a church here partnering there, what's ultimately happening is that holistic care. The church here is helping this church then provide food, education, medical care, trauma counseling. But the beauty of it, because again, it goes to the whole concept of the church being the hope of the world and empowering the church. The beauty in my mind is, because we're partnering with the church, the transformational hope of the gospel is at the core of this, right? And so we're not just providing food, we're not just providing education, medical care, trauma counseling. We're doing that all through the local church, which ultimately is drawing people in and saying, man, you help this family, our family needs help, but they might not have a relationship with Jesus. And so in the midst of families getting the assistance and the help that they need and keeping kids and families, they're also hearing that transformational hope that and that's why we partner with the church. And so I think that breaks it down a little bit. The fifth element that I'd say from a holistic care that we've added over the last couple of years is economic empowerment, and how can we now come alongside families and empower them to really move them forward, and they want to move forward. They haven't chosen this, right? They desire to move forward, but they again need some simple skills or training to help them get from point A to point B. And so some of our biggest accomplishments, I think, over the last couple of years have been really seeing widows in Ethiopia learn that, oh my goodness, I can save. It might not be much, but I can save. So savings programs have been set up. Microloans have been distributed, and so we've been doing this now in Ethiopia for 4 or 5 years, and it's been transformational for these women to see that they can not only save money, but they can start a business, and that business can thrive, and then they can pay that loan back, and then we can continue to do that with more and more women. And so that's really growing in Ethiopia. We're seeing some momentum in Guatemala and Haiti as well. But that would be one other element of the holistic care approach of caring for families. So.
I love that. And I think if anything, it reminds us, because I think we love, as local small churches, we love doing mission trips, and there's nothing wrong with doing mission trips. But I think in the mission trip, we kind of just show up, and we may do something that is helpful for, like, in that moment, or it may not be helpful. I've heard of teams going down and painting houses, and that the folks who were living there had to go back in and paint those houses because they weren't done right, or and it's just like little things like that. But I think it just reiterizes the importance of partnering with an organization like you guys who have been on the ground for years and years, who have these developed relationships, who are constantly working not just for short-term care but long-term benefits and care for these people of what they really need, and partnering with you guys to do the best we can to bring hope and assistance to folks. I think that's exactly what we're called to do if we're going to be effective in international missions, especially. But so yeah, I love that. Well, you guys, this is the question that I was really interested in too, because I love what you guys are doing, and you guys are so creative and how you do things. I mean, recently, in the past several years, you guys have been partnering with Aaron Boyd of Blue Tree, and he's been really furthering these efforts to get the message of World Orphans out there and to provide a fun worship like setting, for families as they come and hear from you guys. You've utilized campaigns to create unique opportunities for people to donate and to raise funds. You provide opportunities for people to sponsor kids, and you've even recently hosted a women's event, which was pretty fun. My wife and my mother-in-law actually participated in that,
Right.
and they loved that. That was so fun. And I think Danielle, right?
Yeah.
One of your coworkers, partners, she kind of hosted that event, and that was so fun. So, how have these unique opportunities benefited you guys? And then maybe what's something coming in the future that people can look forward to?
Right. Yeah. You know, it's been, I think, one of the more exciting things over the last 7 or 8 years has been particularly our relationship with Aaron. And for those that don't know, Aaron, his kind of claim to fame is the song "God of This City" that Chris Tomlin took to all new levels, right? So Aaron is an incredibly talented worship leader, and that story in of itself is pretty cool. But long story short, through somebody who knew somebody who knew somebody else, I was able to connect with Aaron at Big Ticket Festival up in Gaylord, and we just had similar heart and passion for kids, and a lot of that boiled down to and I listened to your interview from a few weeks ago with Jen.
Yeah.
Warning Lights, is that Warning Lights? Yeah.
Yep.
And loved what she's doing. But I think a lot of our conversation with Aaron really stemmed around that anti-trafficking sort of thing, and like how can we work together to make people more aware of, because of the most vulnerable people on the planet to trafficking, it's the orphan, it's the abandoned child that and that can be a true orphan without a mother and father. That could be somebody that's in and out of an orphanage setting. That can be the foster care system here in the States. That can be, it can be a social orphan that is really just feeling alone and abandoned, right? And so anyway, we're talking through a lot of these things and saying, how can we work together? And he said to me, Mike, it's easy. I'll play music and you ask them for money. Which, if you know me at all, asking for money is not like, I don't love asking for money. So it was just really funny the way he said it. Aaron gets away with things because of his accent that you and I can't get away with.
100%.
And we've been doing this now for 7 or 8 years, where we will line up these tours, and we had primarily done these in churches. And 7 or 8 years ago, a few, more, I think more people knew of Blue Tree than they do now. It's kind of one of those bands that it was that one hit wonder. And my hope is that Aaron will have some songs that he still writes, and he's incredibly talented. My hope is that something will come about for him as we continue this partnership with him. But nonetheless, it was easier to book churches back then, whereas now it presents some challenges. So about 3 years ago, I tried something different and asked a donor to host an event in their house, and I was blown away by a couple of things. One, just how intimate that night of worship felt, how incredibly gifted Aaron was at leading a small group of 12, 14 people in some incredible worship, and then how comfortable it was actually to have the conversation of who he is, what we're doing together, and how the partnership with World Orphans looks, and how it benefits kids all around the planet. And I remember thinking after that night, and that night we actually raised more money that night in that house than I had ever seen in a church. No joke. I mean, hundreds of people or a dozen people. And so for me, it was one of those, wow, not only are we raising necessary revenue for our organization, but the depth of relationship that comes out of a 2 to 3
yeah.
hour night was so much more rich. And it was a blessing to me. I know it was a blessing to the people we were with. And so we've done hundreds of these home nights since then. We still will visit churches, and we'll still lead worship at churches if they'd have us for a night of worship or for a Sunday morning worship experience. I know we've been to your church for that.
Mm-hmm.
But that's kind of how it started. That's how it's grown. And Aaron and I always say no plan B. This is plan A, and there's no plan B. Unfortunately, with COVID, I can't get him here, so maybe we need to start thinking about a plan B, because he lives in Northern Ireland, and it's been a little tricky thinking that through. We haven't had him here for a year now,
Mm-hmm.
but we want, you mentioned just creative ways to raise funds, and we just think gathering people is important. And if we really believe relationships over resources is important, then it's more than raising money. It's discipleship, and it's important to help us draw people closer to the heart of the Father. And that's key to who we are. So
Yeah.
um yeah, I think these events with Aaron, we need to get back into that somehow, whether it's with Aaron or somebody else in 2021. And so we're dreaming around what that will look like as this year continues. The women's
Okay.
conference, we had a live, like an in-person event in 2019, and we had to pivot in 2020 and do it all online. And we felt it went amazingly well. Had a great turnout with some really gifted speakers, and actually Aaron helped lead worship for that event. And I know Danielle's working hard on preparing for another one in 2021.
Mm.
That's usually, I think that's in September or
Okay.
October. Um, and then we've got some unique relationships with some American Ninja Warriors, which sounds kind of weird and crazy, but we've done a couple of things, ninja camps with a few ninjas that are fairly well known, and we're looking at doing that again this year. We had to cancel the one we had planned in 2020, but actually heading down heading down to Houston, where a couple of them are next week, and we got some ideas and plans and hopes for another large ninja event that might be up here in Michigan. It might be in Louisiana. We're still kind of, there's a lot to be determined there, but we believe that these people that have a platform are important to really help us gather the masses and get the word out about who we are and what we're doing.
Mm.
And and we don't want to just partner with somebody that has a platform. We want to partner with somebody that has a platform and has that DNA alignment of really wanting to see kids and families restored, and hope
Yeah.
brought as a result of the ministry of World Orphans. So
I love that. That's good, man. And I mean, for anyone who's listening that has been a part of one of your events or has been a part of one of your gatherings, it really is not just like, let's all get together, we'll feed you and then ask for your money. Like, this is something that you guys do a really good job of. Like, that is one of the hardest things to do, is to ask people to support what you're doing. And you guys are so passionate, not only about the mission, but about churches and relationships, that you do such a good job of like um, making it an experience that uh, not just draws people in just for that monetary purpose, really, but you are focused on giving people almost like recentering their focus on what the church's
mm,
mission should be. And I remember it was probably a couple of years ago now, and Tim and I went to a banquet and downtown Grand
yeah,
Rapids, and
yeah,
you remember that. I think you were there as well, and it was just you leave there being refreshed, and
mm,
I that's something unique that not a lot of organizations can do. And I felt like my vision was refocused on what God had been calling us all to do for so
mm,
long. And I love that. So that leads into kind of the next question. But, obviously in scripture, God calls us to care for the least of these, the widow, the orphan, the destitute, those who cannot really care for themselves. So From someone, firsthand who's worked with the least of these, uh, tell us why your work is so important.
Hmm. I think it's important because it's obedience. And
Mm,
I think when we feel or hear or sense God calling us to something, oftentimes it can be pretty easy just to put that on the back burner. But the reality is obedience is pretty important to the heart of the Father. And so these things that we were just talking about, whether it's widow care, orphan care, or trafficking, anti-trafficking stuff, uh, all these things are important, but God wants our heart, and part of our heart is, are we obedient to what He's calling us to do? And
mm,
so I think that's there's so many passages and examples in Scripture of of caring for the least of these, for orphans, but there's just as many, if not more, right on the topic of obedience, and
mm,
how can we really look at this as a calling, yes, but an opportunity. We talk about partnership sometimes flippantly, but ultimately, at the end of the day, that's what we're partnering with God. We're partnering with the Father on these ministry elements, whatever they might be, pastoral ministry, orphan care ministry, and I think that's important.
yep.
Obedience is a huge element to this. I have a passage though that I think is a great one that. Really, I think helps answer the question too. And so I'd love to read that. And this passage is actually Tim Nelson wrecked my life with this passage right here. So you have Tim Nelson to thank for. So thanks, Reverend Tim, for this. But this is found in Jeremiah chapter 5. It's verses 26 through 31. Among my people are the wicked, who lie in wait like those who snare birds and like those who set traps to catch people. Like cages full of birds, their houses are full of deceit. They have become rich and powerful, and they have grown fat and sleek. Sounds
Mm,
like the sounds like the church, doesn't it?
yeah.
Sometimes their evil deeds have no limit. They do not seek justice. They do not promote the case of the fatherless. They do not defend the just cause of the poor. And I'm going to stop because this is one of those. It's one of those parts of scripture. Sometimes we focus a lot on sins that we're committing before a holy and righteous God, sins that we need to stop. You name them: lusting, stealing, cheating, lying, whatever. This passage is really focusing on the sin of omission. What are we not doing?
Mm,
And the sin of omission is just as great of a sin as the sin of commission. And so when I read this, I'm just like, oh my goodness, what are we not doing that God's called us to do? What are we not doing? And then he goes on, should I not punish them for this, declares the Lord? Should I not avenge myself on such a nation as this? A horrible and shocking thing has happened in the land. Gets me every time.
mm,
The prophets prophesy lies. The priests rule by their own authority, and my people love it this way. And then he ends it with, but what will you do in the end? And man, you read that, you think that through, you study that, and you're not burdened to seek justice, to promote the case of the fatherless, to defend the just cause of the poor. Um, how can you not be obedient to that? How
yeah.
can you not? So great passage.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, man. And that's something, when I say your work, this is something that should naturally flow from every person who says yes to the call of Christ on their life. This is something that's not just done by an organization. This is something that every person who says yes to Christ should be doing. And you're setting that example. You're not just calling us to think about it and pray over it and think, like, this is something that we should all be doing. And I love that passage, and I love the call of that, and it challenges us all to think of what we aren't doing. Like, what are we not doing here in our own cities? What are we not doing here in our own towns? And I think that's where this whole podcast grew from, is like, um, what does it look like to be a kingdom city? Are the churches and that fill these cities, are we just not doing what we should be doing? We're doing things,
Yeah.
but are they what we should be doing? And this is perfect. So, and as you mentioned, Tim, he's the senior pastor here at High Point, and it's been awesome to work with him. He has such a missional heart, and he's actually, he had a stint with you guys with World Orphans, which is so cool. That you guys had a chance to work together, and if I believe so, like he was your boss for a little bit, right? Is that right? Or you guys worked together? I can't remember how that story goes.
Hard time about this, but he hired me and then he left me. I mean, I think he hired me, and Tim's a great leader.
Yeah.
And so I loved working with him for the season I did. But literally, I think I got hired in June of 2009 or something like that, and we went on a trip to South Africa together in the fall, and then a few months after that trip, he resigned and went back into church. I think he went back into church. No, he didn't go back into church ministry at that time. I think there was something else.
Yeah.
But Tim's had a lot of different experiences, gifted guy, and I love my time. So, but I think it's really cool is the fact that Tim still believes in World Orphans and in our model, and your church is now one of our church partners. To me, that says a lot about the kind of where he's been and where he's landed. And I love that he's back into church ministry and pastoring. But I love the fact that we get to partner with you guys. So.
Yeah, and that's really been a joy, because we get to live life with another church congregation in a separate part of the world, and get to support them financially, and also get to grow with them spiritually. And I've now been able to witness that here in High Point, and up north in Reed City, and both occasions it was just such a blessing. And that leads us into like how people can get partnering with you guys, I think. So let's get into that. So for maybe an individual, or maybe even a pastor is listening to this podcast right now, and for that individual, even they're weighing a call specifically toward maybe something that like you're doing, right? They want to give their life, even their professional career, to ministering to the often forgot people of the world. What would you say to them? What would you encourage them to do? Even if a pastor, twofold, if a pastor's like, I want our church community to get more involved in what's going on in the world, or even our city, and it's centering around this kind of topic, what would you say to them? So if you can answer both of those.
Well, the person that's feeling called, I mean, that's such a loaded question, right? But I mean, my initial response is do it. I mean, you go back to obedience. And listen, I remember this quote. Growing up, I'd walk out of my bedroom, and on the hallway, there's like this little plaque. There's this old quote that's only one life will soon be past. Only what's done for Christ will last. And I believe that. I mean, I read that every day, and I believe that quote, whether directly or indirectly, inspired me to, because something gets ingrained in your head enough, and you're like, oh yeah, that makes sense. That's right. And so the calling to missions and ministry is, in general, I think it's a high calling. And if you're feeling that call, man, do it. But you know what? So is the calling to business, to teaching, to carpentry. I think that's what we were talking about earlier. Is my encouragement would be that, God would use willing vessels regardless of the field that you're in. But caring for the least of these is incredibly, it's been, for me anyway, it's been incredibly rewarding. And I know it would be for anybody that really feels God calling to them, and bless more than you could ever imagine. All that said, I'll never forget one of the trips I took to Guatemala. It was not the one Shelly was on with me. However, that was a trip. But the trip I took to the Guatemala, this team had an incredible experience, and hearts were broken. They were ready to make a difference. They were ready to go wherever God led. All good things, right? And in the midst of some incredible debriefing and conversation, the missionary of our organization, the same guy I was referring to earlier, he said to the team, I'll never forget it. He said, "Bloom where you're planted."
Yeah.
And I thought, wow, what a great reminder that there's need everywhere. I mean, if God's calling you to Guatemala or Ethiopia, or you name the go. I mean, don't don't disobey His calling. But in the same breath, and I go back to your chat a few weeks ago with Jen. I mean, there's need in your own backyard, and we can't
Yes.
forget about that. There's certainly need in other parts of the world, but man, when you think about all the need that surrounds us wherever we're at, and opportunities to get involved. So, to my original statement, do it. Just obedience is important, and God's got some great things in store for those that listen, obey, and want to be a part of kingdom change. And to the pastor, man, I welcome. Get in touch with Austin to get my contact information. I love talking this sort of stuff. I love talking because I do think church partnership is so it's so important, and it's so cool to see how these churches connect, and the relationships that develop, the love, the care, the you name it. It's just it really is a beautiful thing. And so I'd love the opportunity to talk with you. Our overall kind of our senior director of church partnership actually lives in the Grand Rapids area. And so if a number of people that are watching are in the Grand Rapids area, even connecting in person would be a reality. But if not, I know, Austin, you have some connections all over the place. So if not, even a Zoom call is something that would be easy to do. So I'd be honored to share more and get people more involved in what this really looks like. So.
Awesome. Yeah. So that leads us into our next question beautifully. So how can people best support World Orphans today? What's something that they can do?
Yeah. Oh man. I mean, I th- I think one of the church partnership thing is one of the greatest ways, I think, to really catch the vision of who we are and what we're doing. So if you're a pastor, I mean, that I go back to what we said earlier. Please get in touch with me. But if you're not, you likely know a pastor, and feel free to share this with them, and or again, get in touch with Austin and put me in touch with them. I think that's one of the best ways to do it. And in this season, I would just we value prayer support as we really think through how to really move past um, what's been a challenging year. And I think it's going to be another challenging year. But um, I also believe another quote, I'm going to use it: God's will done God's way equals God's provision. And he's provided, and it's been incredible to see how 2020 kind of came to a close. The provision of the Father, it all came together, and none of our projects had to shut down or close as a result of anything financial. But we've got to continue to think through and be creative how we're gonna do what we do. So, and if you're desiring to get involved financially at all, feel free to you can get on our website, worldorphans.org, or get in touch with me again. Austin can put you in touch, and be happy to chat through some of our funding, some of our funding needs for 2021. So.
Awesome. And for those of you listening or watching right now, you can go to the comments section or the description on this link, and there will be a link to World Orphans webpage and things that we can give them a drop link there. So, Mike, as we close this interview, this time together, I wonder if there's any like last minute just comments, encouragement, things that you can share that you'd like to share with folks listening.
Man, I think you asked some. I remember emailing you saying, "Man, you got some good questions here, bro." So I think you asked some really good questions, and hopefully, I was able to articulate who we are and what we're doing. But I don't think I have anything to add, Austin. I'm just really grateful for the opportunity to be here with you, and honored you asked. So.
Well, Mike, it's certainly been a privilege just to catch up, and before the conversation even was recording, we had a chance to just see about each other's families and things. And I wish everyone listening and watching this could know Mike. I mean, Mike, you've been such a privilege to get to know, because you live life in such a loving, humble way that anyone you meet is an instant friend for you, and that has been such a cool thing to witness and to be able to kind of set that tone for my own life as well. So thank you, just for your friendship and just for being on this call. It's been awesome. But I wonder if I can pray for you and pray for your family today, and just ask that God go with you from here.
Sounds great. Sounds great. Thanks,
All
Austin.
right. Absolutely. God, we thank you for this time. We thank you just for this one place that we can gather to talk about what you're doing in the world, and to thank you for calling us into ministry, all of us, those listening, Mike, myself. You have called us, if we accept you into our heart, that you want us to be a part of this mission, that it's not just something we throw money at and ask other people to do, but it's something special, a blessed call that we get to be a part of your redemption of this world. And I thank you for Mike. I thank you for Amy. I thank you for their kids, and just this wonderful call in their life to go and to be a part of the redemption of the world, and not only the States, but in the international setting, for those who often have trouble providing for themselves, and just need the church. And what a call that is on the church to go and to take care of the widows, the orphans, those who are in financial instability, and those who are being trafficked, and to rescue them, and to come alongside them and live life with them, and to show them who you are in practical ways. So God, as we leave this conversation, I ask a poured out blessing on both World Orphans and the Krick family, and all those who are involved with this organization, that you would continue to grow partnerships, that you would continue to grow interest, that those listening today, that they would hear a spur on their heart, that if they aren't already involved in what World Orphans is doing, that they would seek to be involved, and that if nothing else, that they would be prayer warriors for wonderful folks who are doing real work in the world today. And God, certainly as 2021 continues on, I pray a special blessing over the Krick family, that you would continue to keep them safe and healthy, and that they would be able to do their work effectively. God, we thank you for this time, and ask a blessing over this podcast as it goes to people's ears and as they watch today. So Lord, we thank you for this, and ask that you go with us. It's in your name. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Thanks, Austin. Let's change the world, my brother. Let's change
That's
the world.
right, brother. Hey, don't make it too long now before our next conversation. I'd love to
I love it. I
get
love it.
together
Let's
with
do
you
it next month.
sometime, man.
Let's do it next month. Hey,
I love
I'll be number 3 too. I'll be number 3.
Yes, I love it, man. All right.
All right, bro. Great seeing you.
Tell everyone we said hey. We'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, likewise. Take care.
All right, bye. As you can see, I mean, what an amazing guy Mike is. What a call in his heart to be serving with World Orphans right now, and that's a blessed partnership between the two of them. To be working in the world, to be serving the disenfranchised, to be serving those who are often forgotten. And just like Mike said, this is a topic that needs to be on all of our hearts. This is something that Jesus Christ has called all of us to. I mean, what a cool thing that World Orphans is doing. They're not just they don't exist to just include the church, but they exist to spur the church on to do the work that Jesus Christ has called us to do. And this is something that should be on all of our hearts. This is something that should be introspectively assessed quite often. Are we truly living a life that seeks to benefit those that are at the bottom of the social pecking order? Okay, so am I sacrificing enough to love my neighbor, especially those who are often overlooked? And so I encourage you, if this really spoke to your heart, to get involved with what World Orphans is doing. You can see their link in the description of this podcast, or if you're watching on YouTube, you can see that also in the description. This is something that I think all of us should be involved in, whether you're supporting a child, your church is getting involved by partnering with a church in another country. We're doing that here at High Point and with a church in Guatemala. And I was also a part of that when we were in Reed City and we were supporting a church there. We even sent teams back and forth. You can also go as individuals on these trips that they do across the world. Of course, COVID has kind of put a pause on that, but those will happen, I'm sure, in the near future. But this is something that I just really encourage you to look in on your soul and say, am I really doing this? Am I a part of the work that God has called me to be a part of? Because our faith should be practical as well. It's not just heart and head, but it's hands as well. So how am I living that out? If you are anticipating the next episode, there will be one in March. We're doing these once a month because I work full time, and doing a podcast quite often can be some work. So this is all done in my free time. But if you would like for me to interview someone that you have on your heart and that you would love for their work, their mission to get out there, you can contact me. My email is in the description as well. And you can contact me with their info, their contact information. I'll get a hold of them, and it doesn't matter if they're in Michigan or around the country or around the world. I would love to get their mission out there if they are working for the kingdom, if they are promoting the name of Jesus Christ and continuing to work for his name alone. So next month, we're talking to Alpha Grand Rapids, and they're an organization here locally again that seeks to benefit families with children, and they work with men, women, and families. So they do a great job in near downtown Grand Rapids, just south of there. And we've worked with them as a church before, and I can't wait to have you hear that conversation. So we're talking with their president, and I'm sure it'll be a phenomenal discussion as well. So without further ado, thank you for joining in with Kingdom City Conversations, and we look forward to having you back right here next month. Have a great day, guys, and go in Jesus Christ's name. We'll see you later.